Thanks again to all who have just recently joined. It is the end of the year. Fundraising pushes are coming. Welcome to Getting Personal. This is 5 ways to customize your fundraising efforts to boost donations. Very brief introductions before we dive in. My name is Annette. I am an enterprise account manager on our customer success team, but I also manage a lot of our training efforts. My fundraising experience comes from a bit of higher education, a couple nonprofits, and also fundraising technology, particularly in the peer-to-peer space. I'm very excited to be here with you today. Hats off to all of those who are fundraisers. I feel like it's a job that is not always getting the glory, but very excited to have this group gathered because I have a warm place in my heart. Michael, I'll let you continue with the introductions.
Thanks, Annette. My name is Michael O'Neill. I'm coming to you from Syracuse, New York, and I'm thrilled to announce that I just finished my first year with NationBuilder as an enterprise account manager this past week. Prior to that, I was a NationBuilder customer for about 10 years, and I used NationBuilder for digital communications and fundraising in the context of national and statewide political parties and political campaigns. But I also have some background working in digital comms and fundraising for 501c3, not-for-profit, charitable organizations, and other kinds of mission-driven work. So we wanted to kick off with, like, what's the payoff, right? Like, you're here, you're working on your fundraising efforts. We're going to be talking about a lot of things that you can implement in NationBuilder that might take a little bit of work to get off the ground. And so we want to give a preview of why that's going to be worth it for you. What if we told you that personalized emails have a 29% higher unique open rates? What if we told you that personalized emails had 21% higher click rates? What if we told you that personalized calls to action perform 202% better than just a blank boilerplate? What if we told you that personalized emails generate 6 times higher transactions than one-size-fits-all emails? Who would not want 29% higher unique open rates, 21% higher click rates, 202% better performing calls to action, 6 times the transactions that you're currently getting? If you're here, if you're a fundraiser at a mission-driven organization, if you're trying to change the world with grassroots support, you want all of those things, and we want to help you get them.
We're going to talk through these 5 strategies, the first of which being to really understand your supporters, creating a recurring donor program, creating a peer-to-peer strategy. These are going to be ways that you can customize what ask you're making of your supporters, leveraging liquid logic in order to actually make those asks is going to be strategy number 4. And then finally, there is no webinar about fundraising without including a note on gratitude and thanks. And so we believe that you should also customize that for your supporters. And so that'll be strategy number 5. And then just before we dive in, we have the Q&A here. We hope to have time at the end of the webinar for 5, maybe 10 moments of questions. But as you go, if you have one that's specific, feel free to pop it in there. Michael and I will try to get to those. If we don't get to them, we'll ask for your email and we'll make sure to follow up afterwards. And the whole thing is being recorded, and afterwards we'll send it to you via email, and also you can find it on our YouTube channel. Now that all that's out of the way, foundationally, the first step where we're going to start, strategy number 1, is understanding your supporters. It sounds wonderful. We're going to get into those details, though, of how exactly to do that and also why it's important. The first step being bringing all of your data into one place. So if you're here, you have NationBuilder, maybe you're thinking about NationBuilder. One of the beautiful parts of it is that you can really bring all of your engagement data into one place. So that means your prior donors, your volunteers, those who have attended events. Getting it into NationBuilder allows you to see not just one angle of how someone has engaged, but every angle to understand what their next step may be. This feels like something that is crucial to relationship building as a whole, but it's also crucial to fundraising. So I know I've been guilty in the past of like, oh, we have that one event attendee list that we haven't quite brought in, or maybe someone just sent you a check in the mail. Now's the time. It's the end of the year. Get it all in so that you can start to think about how that fits into the broader puzzle. I also want to think through and encourage you to think through what types of actions are meaningful for your organization. People can sign up for your newsletter, perhaps. They can attend events. Maybe they can make a small dollar donation. This list is going to look differently for each and every one of you, but really do a bit of an audit at your organization. What types of ways can people raise their hand to be involved? And then beyond that, think through how you might begin to segment from there. Maybe you find that some people are not coming to any in-person events and they're mostly staying online. That's a data point that should be considered. Maybe you find that certain folks in a specific area are most interested in one project. This is obviously broad, but think through, as at the top, how you can start to acknowledge which actions are most important and how they can play into the broader scope of building relationships. And I think it goes without saying, but I like to include it. Your prior and past donors are super important. They're going to be crucial to hopefully the work that you are doing. We hope they come back because they got such a good thank you from you in the past. But let's think big. This is the beginning, right? How are others getting involved? Do you have volunteers who've never donated? Do you have young people who might want to get involved? Think through all of those individuals who you might not see as a donor right now. Some of the strategies that we walk through could be a good fit for them. So, getting to know your people. How do you get to know your people? NationBuilder people filters are one of the most powerful ways of getting into understanding who you're actually talking to, who has come to your organization and is, for whatever reason, in your nation, and why are they there? So what you see here is a list of a few different segments of people filters. So each of these volunteer has RSVP'd, corresponds to a people filter that you can run in your nation. This is not meant for you to build like the filter to rule all filters, right? Like this is meant to give you an idea of the way that you might begin to unpack how folks have engaged. I know these filters like the back of my hand, and every day I think it's a really powerful tool that you can look at folks who were created in the last year and have a relationship with a certain organization. Like that's powerful. So as you see the filters here, begin to think about how the donation history, the engagement history, attributes of those supporters, and also their interests can play a role in defining your segments. Maybe you're not yet recording folks' interests, but it's something that you want to do. That might be something that you look forward to. And if you take away something from this webinar that isn't fundraising related, corresponding folks' interests with how they want to engage is something that can be really powerful. One question that I inevitably get from customers when we start to think about very specific segments and sending those individuals emails is how to make sure that you're excluding the right supporters, right? We don't want individuals to get two asks that don't necessarily apply to them. And so if we imagine that you have your various segments, the question of making sure that folks don't overlap can depend. One way, a few different ways that you can do that is through people who do not have a certain tag. So that filter would be does not have X tag, folks who have not been sent a particular blast, or those who are not on a particular list. So what I hope you walk away from this webinar with is kind of a mental note, maybe vague, maybe specific, but eventually I hope you leave with essentially a filter that helps you identify who those individuals are and what your ask will be from them. So zooming out, we're still in this stage of understanding how our supporters have engaged to help us identify the best segments. And a couple of different ways that you can do that beyond people filters include first the finance filters. So if you run a people filter, you will get a list of individuals. But if you run a finance filter, so in the finance section, we also have the ability to run those filters. you can get into more detail around those transactions. So maybe you leverage the finance filters to help you set your goal for this year's end of year fundraising. That can be another really helpful tool to balance not just the individuals, but also the actual dollars. And then one, I think, additional data point that can be really powerful is the annual report. A little bit hidden, I think, but it's a great one to know about. Thank you, Michael, for shouting it out. If you head to the dashboard and then you click on annual report, you have the ability to download this annual report as either a PDF or a CSV. Inside this annual report, if it's a PDF, you'll find some pre-built charts and graphs around your members, your fundraisers, I think maybe the top events that you might have held each year. And so this can be another way of gathering that data. If it's a CSV, it'll give you that raw data, and then you can do with it whatever you please to help kind of cut and slice it in a way that helps you understand your supporters better. So, I wanted to give a visual of, if we talk about personalization, what does that actually look like? We might consider thinking about creating various segments for your end of year push. Giving Tuesday is obviously coming up. The end of year is a time where hopefully you're already starting to think about what comms you will send out to folks, but wanted to provide just a glimpse into the different ways that you might consider segmenting these comms. So maybe you have a group that have never donated in the past, they're brand new, and the ask that you want to make to them is simply to become a one-time donor or a recurring donor. The best person to send that could be someone that they've already interacted with. And so you're really just continuing that relationship. That's going to be different from folks who may already be signed up for a recurring donation, and they know a lot about your organization. They're bought in and to a certain level. And for them, the call to action that you might want is actually to increase the recurring donation amount. So this is going to look different again for each of you, but if you take one thing away, like the thought of noting that each segment is going to get something a little bit different, the call to action that you make of them should reflect how they've engaged in the past. And there's a lot of things that you can do to make sure that that resonates and is personalized. I'm going to kick it over to Michael to keep chatting about some of the different ways that you can personalize that.
Thanks, Annette. So Annette has been giving you the zoomed out overview of how you can analyze and segment out the different relationships that you have with different kinds of supporters based on how long they've been a supporter or what their involvement or contributions have been up to this point. Now we're going to zoom in on one of those segments, which would be folks who are good candidates for designing a recurring donor program. And so why are we focusing on a recurring donor program in the precious time that we have with you in this webinar today? Well, a recurring donor program, having people sign up for recurring donations, whether on a monthly or annual basis using NationBuilder payments in your nation, is a fantastic way to maximize your efforts. Why? One of the foundations of fundraising strategy is that givers give. The people who are already giving to your organization are much more likely to give again than people who have never given to your organization before. Now, of course, you need to bring in new donors, you need to prospect, but the return on investment that you'll get by nurturing the relationship with your existing donors and bringing them formally into a recurring donor program where they're automatically subscribed to make a contribution on a regular basis is one of the best and easiest ways to increase the impact that your donors are having, which is what your donors want. They're contributing to a mission-driven organization or campaign like yours because they want to affect a change in the world that they can't do on their own. And so they're supporting you and your mission in doing that. So this is a way to help them make that impact. It's a way to make it easier for them to give on a recurring basis. They can set it and forget it. Although they're not going to forget it because you're going to remind them through the thanking that you do on a regular basis. And also it's a way that makes a much more stable financial foundation for your campaign or your organization so that you can plan programming and other initiatives knowing that you have that steady baseline of recurring contributions coming in through recurring donations. And it's a defined step on the supporter journey that you're moving donors through. Namely, you are targeting people who have given on a sporadic, spontaneous, maybe irregular basis, and you're asking them to make a more thoughtful commitment to your organization, to your mission, by signing up for this recurring contribution and making an even bigger impact with their gifts. So in building that relationship, right, there are some steps that you can take to make this relationship ask, this next level to which you are taking your donor's relationship with your organization. You can build up that program. One, give it a name, make it real within your organization. Now, having this be formalized as an initiative within your organization, within your campaign, saying, hey, we're going to lean into this. We really want to put some effort into getting one-time donors into becoming recurring donors. That's going to help you focus your efforts, your energy, your strategy into that, and making sure you're being intentional about how you are interacting with these donors, and both in terms of how you're asking them to become recurring contributors and then how you're thanking them and cultivating that relationship going forward. When coming up with the name, you could go something standard like Gold Circle Donors or Monthly Sustainers. And if that's where you're at, that's okay. But we really encourage you to be creative. If you're looking for ideas, you want to make something that is specific to your organization, your campaign, your mission, your issue. A pun is always a great idea, or alliteration. If you can do a pun or an alliteration based on your brand or your mission, that's a great place to start. You can even invite your supporters to help you name your recurring donor program. If you have existing recurring donors, that's a great way to elicit more buy-in from them. In addition to having an explicit name and kind of making this relationship official and real to your donors, you want to define some benefits for them. Your donors are contributing to your organization because they're getting something out of it. And the main thing they're getting out of it is that sense of satisfaction that their contribution is having an impact in the world that they couldn't just do on their own. And so what can you provide to those donors in terms of information or connection, access to your leadership, digital opportunities, in-world meetings, to one, recognize them for the contribution they're making, the commitment that they've taken on, and two, also just like make that connection to your mission, to the impact that you're having, more real. Maybe it's a specific newsletter or webinar that's exclusive for your recurring donors. Yeah, connection, information, and impact. Those are like the three keys that I recommend you go back to over and over. On the more practical side of things, we strongly recommend making use of NationBuilder's supporter portal feature. It might be difficult for me to say, but it makes it a lot easier for your donors to manage their recurring subscription. With the supporter portal activated, they can go to a defined page in your nation's website, and they can see what are they signed up for in terms of recurring contributions, what's the amount, what is the payment method they have associated with that, and the address that they have on file. Knowing that they can monitor that themselves whenever they want, they don't have to call up your organization, they don't have to email you, is going to be such a relief for them. It builds more trust in your organization, and it lowers the sense of friction in the commitment that they're taking on by becoming a monthly or annual contributor to your organization. Also, with the supporter portal, with NationBuilder payments, you can send an annual reminder automatically to your donor, letting them know that their annual contribution is coming up. If you have memberships tied, like actual NationBuilder membership features tied to this in your nation, you can set all kinds of reminders for if a membership is going to renew, or many aspects of that. There's a lot you can dive into on our support documentation on that here. Unfortunately, I don't have much time to go deeper into that. The last thing I would recommend for now in terms of building up your program is spreading the word, both within your organization to make sure you've got that buy-in among your key volunteers, your staff, your board of directors, your leadership team, that you are sending out an email series workflow to your most engaged supporters, asking them to become recurring donors, tracking that outreach on a path. Maybe some of those folks you make a follow-up call to and ask them if they would be willing to become a recurring donor before the end of the year, and then track whether or not they've received that phone call or whether you've had a chance to speak with them on that path. Make sure that your staff is aware of how people can sign up to become a recurring donor. The last thing you want is for someone who is in the core team of your organization out there in the world, maybe at the farmer's market, maybe at a gathering related to your issue, and someone says, hey, I've been meaning to become a recurring donor. How do I do that? And that staffer or that key volunteer doesn't know how. You can always follow up with that person, but it's even better if you have that knowledge spread within your organization about how people can participate in this way. So let's talk about that method of becoming a recurring donor. We recommend having a dedicated donation page on your website for your recurring donor program. You can tailor it to 2023 and an end of year push. And in addition to that targeted content, some of the other benefits of having a dedicated page for this recurring donor initiative is, on the back end, having a specific tracking code so that on an ongoing basis, you can see how much of your revenue is coming in through your recurring donors or this specific recurring donor drive. You can have a dedicated auto response email that is tailored to thanking them for becoming a recurring donor and other things that they can do to make use of the benefits that you're offering to them for them becoming a recurring donor. You can have automatic tagging from that page that is, again, specific to this recurring donor campaign, so you can track those results, and also so that that tag is visible so that whenever someone goes to that supporter record in your nation, they can see, this is a recurring donor. You can have a specific thank you page that people land on after they donate. That's maybe asking them to spread the word about the recurring donor program, or just having a tailored thank you to them. Thank before you bank is another tenet of fundraising that we highly recommend. You can have an email workflow that is an automated email series triggered by that specific donation page, sending them multiple thank yous. And if depending on how comprehensive your recurring donor program is in terms of benefits, it might be like a mini onboarding series in terms of letting them know what their rights and privileges are as a recurring donor, or just telling a few more stories about how their recurring contribution is making an impact. Maybe one of the emails is from an existing recurring donor talking about why they became a recurring donor and thanking this donor for doing the same. Make sure that you test your recurring donation page and make sure that the user's experience is pleasant and that they're not going to be confused. Again, you want to make sure that they have high trust in your organization while they're making this commitment to you.
This is the point in the webinar where I know that each of these could, and some have been, their own separate webinars. And so for strategy number 2, recurring, and for this one as well, there's a lot of details. We have some resources that we'll share afterwards. The purpose of including them here is just to understate that everyone is going to and should receive a slightly different ask. And so thinking about how folks can get engaged beyond just doing what you've been doing is really powerful. So another unique way that folks can engage with you all is to be a part of your peer-to-peer fundraising strategy. So why this is important, turning your supporters into fundraisers outright is a really powerful way for exponential growth. Obviously, you have your existing email list, you have your existing folks who have donated, but giving your supporters the opportunity to tell your story on your behalf is going to help you reach all of the folks who love them, who are in touch with them, and you may find new people who can get involved. There's no other way that you can do that. I think that these are a great way to really grow in relationship. You know, some folks may be ready to make a large donation on their own, but actually making the ask on your behalf for those who can or cannot make that huge donation is bringing you all closer together. Them sticking their neck out on your behalf to say that they really believe in what you do, so much so that they're going to be willing to ask their own friends and family that they have relationships with to help, is so powerful and should be thanked. Spoiler alert, that's a huge part of your peer-to-peer program. And so this can be a really crucial way to kind of expand. This is great. It's great to have the opportunity for folks to kind of opt in to start a fundraiser year round. And in my experience, it's really best when it's either around a specific day, Giving Tuesday, something that might be unique to your cause, whether that's International Day of Yoga, if you're in a yoga org, or your upcoming event, or donating your birthday. Having these as ideas for folks to kind of understand and frame is going to be really helpful for folks who might not have, experienced this in the past, or are really looking for a playbook, a guidebook for how to get involved. So good to have this as a landing page on your site, but also good to have some examples of how folks can do that. Building your peer-to-peer plan. So it's one thing to kind of turn on the technology. We're going to talk about that here shortly, but it's another thing to really support those fundraisers and give your fundraisers everything that they need to be successful. That begins with really defining the goal. So for you all, as you're thinking about inviting people into this new way of existing with you as a fundraiser, think about what that goal is. For the first year, I highly recommend just maybe a recruitment or participation goal. Maybe we have 3 fundraisers this year that, start a personal fundraising page on our behalf. Maybe you're a little bit further down the line, or you have some supporters who are already ready to go out into the world, and you want to make that a monetary goal. Lay that out up front. I touched on this a bit, but I see these really the best when they are, 4 to 6 weeks, or just a dedicated runtime that is not too long, not too short. If it's a Giving Tuesday, obviously like within a week is when it's all going to happen. But really thinking through like how to make those communications very clear. And if it is something that is ongoing, so you want to give people the opportunity to donate their birthday at any point throughout the year, how are they going to find out about that? Do you have a landing page? Are you going to think through the best way to present the information for what they might put on their page? Do you have a staff person in terms of sustainability? Who's going to manage it? Not meant to kind of, show you how much work it possibly could be, but if you do have folks who are ready for this and you are ready to kind of invite people to be a fundraiser on your behalf, really think about how they'll be recognized, how this fits into your larger scheme of fundraising and being a supporter. And then finally, I find that usually if I kind of close my eyes and think about who the biggest supporters are, I hope that you have a handful of people who you're like, oh, so-and-so would be so ready. And if you're not, I invite you to think back to all of those filters that we talked through at the beginning. So come back to the data. Who has donated more than once in the last year? Who is a recurring donor for you? Some folks, maybe an arguable point, is this a requirement for every single one of the individuals on your young professionals board? There are ways that you can really build this into your process so that it's something that folks feel excited about and also have all the tools they need to be successful in. It is such an empowering feeling to know that you personally have contributed $1,000 to an org that you care about so deeply. Having been on both sides, I think it's something that really fires people up and can really take the relationship even further. I could talk about this forever, but we have a lot to discuss. But I think supporting your fundraisers is huge. So you probably have 3 bullet points of why your work is so important this year. Create a toolkit that you can share with your fundraisers that they can essentially pull from, and also encourage them to share why they're drawn to your cause. That personalization is going to be important, but making sure that they don't have to reinvent the wheel is also crucial. Encouraging competition can go such a long way. We have leaderboard pages, and so you can internally show who's kind of raised the most money in the right amount of time. But if you want, you can make that public, encourage some friendly competition, check in regularly, and really build a community among your supporters. I have a few years of experience in the endurance racing, like peer-to-peer fundraising space. And so that's a nice model when you think about it for folks who are running a marathon and they want to run it, but they want to do it for a good reason. Maybe you pair someone who's done it in the past with someone who is like starting a fundraiser for the first time. Having another voice from someone who isn't in your shoes as a staff member or a volunteer can really be helpful, and it helps them feel like this is not some big daunting thing, but something that you should feel really excited about. And that last bullet, I am going to be a broken record. It's a huge step to email your friends and family and ask them to donate money to something. I imagine that we have a lot of fundraisers here, and we're probably just like very used to just shooting an email off and asking for what our organization really needs. But not everyone is like us, y'all. So this is a huge step. Say thank you. Make sure that that's a part of your thought process as you're building the program. From the technology standpoint, how does this work on NationBuilder? Personal fundraising pages can easily be turned into something that is public facing that your supporters can share with their friends and family. So they'll have a unique link that they can send out with a donate button, with a fundraising goal, and all the donations that come into that page will be credited to them. They'll be noted as the fundraiser. Make sure that you're creating a tracking code so that you can easily see which of those donations are a result of this particular effort. And then finally, optional but encouraged, I would say, is a leaderboard. For sure, internally setting that up so that you can really visually see what that looks like. But externally, humans are humans. I continue to be surprised by how competitive we are. And so like acknowledging those who are in, the top 3 fundraisers in some way, even in a weekly email, like, oh, so-and-so jumped from spot 2 to spot 1 is a little bit, you're riling them up, but it can be really powerful and fun, right? If you can make this thing that can be intimidating into something that brings joy and helps like grow that community, even better. In the follow-up blog, I'm going to share, we'll share a link to one of our customers who did just a really great job of customizing their end of year campaign. And so I'm not going to get into it now because we have a lot to cover, but keep an eye out in our follow-up for an example of one of our customers out of Australia who helped to deliver cookbooks and really like got to know their community and found a way to make that specific ask.
So Annette has been talking about some of the features for peer-to-peer fundraising. And so I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk about some of the features that you can use to segment your donation asks. And Annette was just talking about the blog post that's going to be a follow-up to this webinar. And I just wanted to flag that because this section has a little bit more technical content in it, it will also be referenced in that blog post. We are not expecting you to absorb everything that we're going to throw at you in these next few minutes just by looking at the screen. You'll have some great references and templates to work from on our NationBuilder blog. And in fact, I recommend going to nationbuilder.com/guides. That's plural for guide. And there is a post there that actually a lot of the material that I'm going to talk about now is inspired by, and that is called Email Personalization 101. And you can, again, find that in nationbuilder.com/guides. That will almost certainly also be linked in the blog post that will follow up from this webinar. But that guides section has other deep dives into things that we've been talking about here and other aspects of NationBuilder that could be really impactful for your mission. So it's an amazing team that produces that content, and I always want to shout them out whenever I can. Getting back to the topic at hand, customizing your calls to action. So we've been talking about how every relationship with each donor is unique and each donor is on a unique supporter journey, and you've been gathering all of this history and data about what their interests are and their relationship to your organization and how long they've been given and how frequently and how much. And you might be thinking now, well, how on earth do I have all these unique conversations with all of my donors? And the great news is that you can actually leverage NationBuilder tools to give people personalized attention without you individually having to put individual focus on them, right? You're going to leverage now all the history and data that you've been gathering and faithfully tagging and using tracking codes and things like that to have the system do the work for you to send those customized calls to action and personal attention without you having to max out your time on that. So some of these customized CTAs might include different kinds of donation asks that might vary in the amount of the ask, or maybe whether it's asking for a one-time donation or a recurring donation, as we were talking about earlier, or maybe you're asking them to be a fundraiser in that peer-to-peer fundraising way that Annette was just talking about. You want to make sure that you are recognizing their past engagement and doing so in a way that is specific to how they have engaged in the past. Having your supporters who have engaged previously be thanked in a way that's relevant and specific to that. It builds trust with your organization. It helps them feel like their contribution has been seen and recognized and that they're having that impact that they want to see in the world. People care about other people. They also care about themselves, which is where the recognition comes in. But having a customized call to action that tells a story or is signed by someone who is especially relevant to that recipient of that e-blast can have a big impact. And so telling the story of your organization, telling the story of the impact you have had over the previous year, talking about how, if they're an existing donor, how their donation made that impact possible. What were the lives that were changed by the contribution they made towards your organization or campaign? You want to show that impact. What has been done? What could be done with more support if they take that one-time contribution and turn into a recurring donor? Talk about who is benefiting and make sure that you humanize that story. And I just want to touch again on how key it is to recognize their previous contributions. When a donor is already a recurring donor and they see an email appeal that says, "Will you become a recurring donor today?" They're thinking, well, I'm already a recurring donor and I'm wondering why you don't know that, right? And it's not the end of the world, but if you can use some of the tools that we're just about to talk about to customize that message at the end of your e-blast, so that instead of seeing an appeal to become a recurring donor, instead they're being thanked for already being a recurring donor, that just builds so much more confidence in your organization that they know that you're on top of it and you're taking the time to thank them specifically for the commitment that they've made. It's a huge win for you and your relationship with them. Let's get into the details here about how you can leverage the tools that we've been talking about to have customized calls to action without you having to manually type out, 500 different emails to your donors, because that would be impossible. If you have sent out snail mail, direct mail pieces to your donors, then you're probably familiar with mail merge. And that's basically what we're doing here, except there are so many things we can do in eBlast with NationBuilder using smart fields and using liquid logic that you can't do on paper with a piece of postal mail. So there's two broad categories of features that you can use in your eBlast to create these customized calls to action. The first is smart fields, and those are the easy tools. This is easy mode. It's a great way to start. These are point and choose plain language placeholder fields that you can put in your eBlast that will generate dynamic content based on the recipient's data and history. So the most basic one is a smart field for first name. So you're saying, "Hello, Annette," instead of just "Hello, friend," or hello, and no addressing of them by name at all. You can use a smart field for the last donation amount. And so asking them to contribute based on that last donation amount. That is a built-in pre-populated field that you can just point and click and insert into an e-blast to your donors today. The amount that they've given year to date, that's available for you. The number of times that they've donated, that's available as a smart field. So smart fields appear in plain English language, right? Just first name, last donation amount. That's how the placeholder appears to you. Very easy to use. The next level, the intermediate mode, is using liquid template tags, which look like a little bit like HTML code or maybe other forms of code that you've maybe seen in a movie or on a TV show if you yourself don't have direct experience with working with coding languages. Those can insert values like we've been talking about with the smart fields, but the payoff for using them, even though they're a little bit more difficult, is they can do things that smart fields cannot. For example, you could show different blocks of text to a recipient of an e-blast based on a tag in their profile. So if they're tagged as being interested in a particular issue or having come from a particular recruitment source, then you can have customized content appearing for them and only them in that e-blast. Another thing that you can do using actual liquid code is calculate a custom donation ask based on their most recent amount. So you could have a suggested amount that is, for example, their last donation amount times with a 50% increase, right? So you could have that be a different amount for each person based on their donation history using liquid logic. It takes a little bit of time to learn, but the payoff can be massive. All right, let's look at an example of how we can use this liquid logic. And again, I don't expect you to absorb this just from looking at it on a webinar screen. You can check out that blog post I mentioned, Email Personalization 101, that is listed on our nationbuilder.com/guides page and also will be referenced in the follow-up blog post for this webinar. But I'll just walk you through it. And of course, the Q&A is open for any questions that you have. So on the right side of the graphic that I'm showing you right now, that's what it looks like in the email composition editor. And then on the left side is an example of what that text would display as for someone who meets the given criteria, matching the example user who's composing this e-blast. So let's start at the top. At the very underneath where it says donor, within those funny curly brackets, there's a tag that says if and recipient is donor. And so that does pretty much what it says. If the person receiving this e-blast is a donor, then they will see the text and the button that immediately follows that curly bracket snippet. It's drawing on their donation record in your nation. So if they contributed offline and you haven't logged that donation yet to their profile, then they're not going to see that donor recognized language. So this is a great reason to, clean up your books here before you start this kind of a program. Get those donations logged. So the second bullet point is pointing to the actual text, indicating the message that is targeted to someone who's already a donor. They've given at least once in the past, and it's thanking them for being a donor, because thank before you bank, recognize the impact they're having, and then it suggests a donation amount based on the donor's average amount donated. That suggested amount is being generated again by that second set of curly bracket funny looking words, and that is an existing liquid tag, and it's going to dynamically insert that, and it's an average based on their total amount given over the lifetime of their relationship with your organization divided by the number of times that they have given. If the person is not a donor, the system will recognize that they do not meet that if recipient is a donor requirement, And it will instead show them the text and the button that appears after the curly bracket else tag there. So we've got an A or a B option. If they're a donor, they will see option A. If they're not a donor, they will see option B, which is language. That is a specific invite to people who have not yet given, asking them to donate to help in this way. And then there's a donate here button. If I were the one composing this e-blast, I would probably have the first donate here button intended for existing donors going to one page, and then the donate here button that's going to people who have not yet given going to a different donate page that is specifically geared to welcoming first-time donors and probably having a lower suggested amount that you're asking them to contribute to make it as kind of frictionless as possible for them to make that first contribution. I want to emphasize that because you're essentially sending two different e-blasts with this kind of a thing, you want to make sure that you test each one. And the system will show you text, you, the control panel user, based on the history in your control panel user record. So when you're logged in as a control panel user in your nation and you're composing this e-blast and you're a donor, there are donations to the organization logged to your control panel user supporter record, then it's going to show you the output that's listed on the left, which is intended for donors. But you're going to want to test how it looks to people who are not yet donors to make sure everything's displaying right. So I would recommend that you send a test message to a fake account within your nation that you can access that does not have any donation records attached to it for this example. The upshot is that for however many versions that you're including in your email blast with this conditional logic, make sure you see what the output is for each of the possibilities, which might require having access to nation profiles in your nation that match each of those, whether it's a tag or not having a tag, having donated or not having donated, et cetera, et cetera. And so now, Annette is going to talk about how you can show gratitude to your donors year round because thanking is so important. Take it away, Annette.
Absolutely. As you are planning your strategies for how you will hopefully grow your donations, how you will thank folks should be absolutely a part of what you're thinking about right now. Within NationBuilder, there's a few, ways that we would recommend, and then also getting creative. So just starting kind of building off of what Michael had shared, smart fields can also be really helpful in the immediate acknowledgement emails that come from NationBuilder. So we'll have a preset list. You can check out an email blast and kind of pull up what those look like. See which ones might be relevant to you all. Obviously having their first name, obviously thanking them for the donation amount, but there may be others that apply to your specific use case. And so making sure that immediate thank you is acknowledging them for exactly the action that they took rather than just a generic thank you. We also would recommend, if it applies to that segment, setting up an automation thank you. So an automation within NationBuilder, it's going to be in the workflows section, and it's going to allow you to send a series of emails separated by a dedicated amount of time of your choosing. So this could look like one email for the next 3 weeks after that donation, really thanking them for the role that they played. So again, this will look different for those who set up a peer-to-peer fundraiser. You could have multiple automations there, right? So like maybe the first 3 days, they get the instructions for how to become a fundraiser. But after it closes, think through what you actually want to share with them. If it's a brand new donor, as Michael noted, you might have almost an onboarding thank you that says, like, here are all the ways that your donation is in action. Having it not just be a single email response, but rather a kind of elongated kind of series helps them understand that you're taking that thank you seriously. It's not just a one-time thing. You're still grateful, etc. And then finally, these last ones like may or may not happen on NationBuilder, but I think it's really powerful to just get creative. Going back to, how each of you are your own unique organization, you're going to have different ways that are going to be the best route for showing your thanks. So some common ones might be a handwritten note. I love snail mail. I think this goes a long way. Maybe it's a phone call from the executive director or a key volunteer. Maybe your young folks or all ages really appreciate like a shout out on social media. Think through the opportunities that you have. Oftentimes I think folks assume that they need to, have a mug or something that can kind of be a physical gift of thanks, but this does not have to be the case. So you might have opportunities that are experiential to just sit down and thank folks. This is something where I'm kind of like giving you the seed, but you're going to be the one who's going to have to carry it across the line in terms of that creativity. The key message, the key takeaway being each of those thank yous should be representative of how they've engaged. Okay, and then closing it out here in our last few moments, we wanted to kind of end with a few thoughts. I start by saying that this work is absolutely work that you can be proud of. I'm imagining myself in y'all's shoes going into the end of the year, probably with a million things on your plate. And from my experience, it's very easy to feel like this is just one more thing. But I love this quote from our CEO, Leah, where she really touches on how fundraising is not just about that sort of transactional way of you all funding your work, but it's rather inviting your supporters into a deeper community, a deeper relationship. So I hope that you leave with a feeling of the work that you're doing, not just being about the goal, about the number, but actually building your community in a way that helps your supporters feel like they're absolutely involved. A few other notes, you don't have to do it all alone. Distribute leadership. Maybe you have someone who's been a fundraiser in the past who can take on the task of creating the email blast that ask. Use permission sets to distribute leadership. That goes hand in hand with leveraging the technology. Think through how you can have that leaderboard set up or those personal profile pages so that you don't have to be the one doing all of the work. And make sure that you are listening and adjusting. So as you're making those asks, be receptive to what you might be hearing from your supporters. This is obviously important when we think about building an email program. So did that email get opens? Did it get clicks? And this is a similar concept here. We're not just kind of blasting out into the ether. These are your supporters. Think through how this is being received. What are people feeling when they receive it, and see how you might adjust. And finally, year one can be simple. So I showed that chart at the top, thinking through the different ways that you might segment your folks. Maybe you looked at that and you thought, that is so much, Annette. There's no way that we could possibly have that many different pieces. Choose one segment, like simplify it. On the other hand, maybe you're feeling as though you already have that in place and you want to kind of go deeper. Think about one goal that you can choose from within all of your goals to really focus on. We hope to provide you with the tools to be able to achieve all of that.